Dropping another quick video here to share some immediate reactions to the Warriors having beaten the Rockets barely in overtime by 6 points after leading by as much as 31 points. Losing that kind of lead to send the game to overtime is practically unprecedented. It's one thing to lose a 20-point lead or even a 25-point lead, but to go up by more than 30 and then to lose it all by the end of regulation, that's different. That's a different kind of choke. So what exactly happened in this game that caused the Warriors defense to deteriorate the way it did? And what changes did they make, at least in overtime, to overcome these deficits that they had to face in the second half of the game? And quite possibly the most important question of all, what exactly is it that has turned the Warriors season around from whatever it was last season? What is the biggest fundamental change? Of course, the Warriors brought in these veterans that make them look more together, more connected from an all-around standpoint. But there is a key thing that has allowed their defense to be great on a pretty consistent basis, unlike last season. And that difference is the size at the power forward and center spots. As you guys know, I had been pining for Jackson-Davvis to be in the Warriors rotation since game 1 of last season. When they played the Suns, he didn't get any playing time. Corey Joseph is in rotation. The Warriors are comically small and they have no proper path to play any type of elite defense, the type of defense that can shut the water off of other teams. And that's the biggest difference between last season and this season. Now, obviously, their offense has also improved vastly, but they were 9th in offense last season. So it's not exactly like they were absolutely horrendous offensively. The biggest change comes from the defensive end of the floor, where they were ranked 15th. And it took them a chunk of the second half of last season to even get to 15th. Because for a large chunk of it, they were like 22nd, 21st, 20th. 19th. They were hovering in that range. Just absolutely awful, just absolute joke of a defense. And, well, to call that championship caliber would be a joke. And so how do you play better defense? Well, first and foremost, you have to have the right guys at the right positions. You have to, at the bare minimum, have strong defenders at the center spots and power forward spots. You have to have that. It's non-compromisable. And then obviously you have to have the POAs, multiple of them. So that has been the biggest change. Now, when have the Warriors struggled the most this season so far? They've lost one game, and they damn near lost to this one tonight. And even the last game against the Pelicans in the second quarter, this is something that Steve Kerr acknowledged, is that they had better combinations that could play better defense, and he let some of those lineups that didn't have certain pieces go on for a little bit too long. So for him to have acknowledged that the last game, and then to see what he did in this game against the Rockets, particularly in the fourth quarter, when essentially Steve just kind of decided to go small the rest of the quarter, and it continues to puzzle me. I just don't understand or can't fathom the fact that the Warriors started the game off with Trace in the starting lineup next to Draymond, and they started Moody today instead of Waters, and, well, they yielded some really great results. They were a +9 to begin the game, which allowed the bench to come in and do what they normally do. So the starting lineup having a significant advantage over the other team through great defense is a big deal. This is the thing that allowed the Warriors to lead by as much as 31 points and headed into the second half of the game with a 28-point lead. And then the third quarter comes, and, well, basically what ended up happening was that Trace played something like 5.5 minutes of the third quarter, and then he got sat. Same thing with Moody, who got sat soon after Trace, as well as Wiggins. And the Rockets just got off to a better start in the second half, more focused, trying to make a comeback. And you can see the momentum shifting a little bit. And I thought it was very important for the starting lineup to continue to establish what they had started in this game. Usually the second half of games is not the same as the first half. In the second half, you really go for that killer move. And you look for the starting lineup to really help put the game away before you start going to your bench rotations. You know, the Rockets did get off to a little bit of a better start than the Warriors to start the third quarter, but at the end of the day, when Trace was on the floor in the third quarter, he was only a -2. So things were still okay at that juncture of the game when he left. What's absolutely insane is that when Trace left the game, the Warriors had a 27-point lead. That lead evaporated all the way down to 0 by the fourth quarter, and Trace never got back into the game. And he only played 13 minutes. This is how you reward a guy who's holding it down against the other team's starting opposition? It doesn't make any sense. Steve is not properly rewarding players that deserve more playing time. And then again, he continues to watch the lead evaporate. And eventually in the fourth quarter, he elected to go to a lineup where it's Draymond and Jonathan Kuminga at the 4. The reason the Warriors struggled as much as they did last season was because they couldn't figure out what their closing lineups needed to be, and they kept playing small lineups that are incapable of consistently rebounding after getting stops, not having enough length to guard either the paint or outside. So they're just giving up everything left and right, whether it's outside or inside. And that's kind of what ended up happening tonight in the second half. Steve's crazy obsession with these lineups where the guy at the power forward spot cannot properly play that position, not only does that make Jonathan Kuminga look worse than he needs to look, because he's not a great rebounder, and if you're not a great rebounder, you can't put that next to Draymond and expect a smaller lineup to succeed. There's no way you can create consistent separation with that kind of lineup. And the worst thing about it is that the Warriors have so many bigs this season. They have Looney, who just looks like a completely different version of himself. They have Slo-Mo, who is a reliable vet. They have Draymond, and they have Trace. That's 4 bigs that they could use to mix with Draymond at the power forward spot. He doesn't have to play the center spot unless they come up with a lineup so advantageous that it is actually worth going small. Now, is the lineup of Draymond, Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, GP2, and Pods, is that a lineup worth running? What is the value of running that lineup? Does that create separation from the other team? Is it some kind of cheat code? If it is, then run it. But it's not. That's the problem. And if it's not, then you don't just go small just for the sake of going small when you have parts that don't fit, trying to overexert their ability to do whatever it is that they're trying to do. I just don't understand why it's so hard for this guy to understand that Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga are not viable options at the 4 in crunch time, in a tight situation. You're just overexerting everybody. Wiggins now has to be able to guard the outside and be able to rebound. Same thing with Jonathan Kuminga. You are giving these guys more taxing roles, especially Draymond at 6'6", 35 years old, and you're trying to get him to basically do everything. Come on. There's no need for this. You need to preserve these guys. Andrew Wiggins actually went down with a back issue. You know, he's been out for the last couple of games because he's had a back problem, and it sure looked like it flared up again in this game. That's not good. It's especially not good when you're asking your primary POA to cover the paint area at the same time. They have to stop doing this. And the best thing about tonight, and this gotta be an adjustment from the rest of the coaching staff that probably had advised Steve Kerr to not continue to go this route that was going so badly. The Warriors getting outscored in the second half. I mean, I'm sorry, you gotta be clinically insane to try to go with these ridiculous lineups that are not good enough to defend. Watch your team lose the second half 62-34. They were outscored by 28 points once Trace left the game in the third quarter. It's simple math, right? They were up by 28 when Trace left the game, and then by the end of the fourth quarter, it was a tie game. So what happens in overtime? An adjustment is made. Draymond fouled out. The Warriors had no path playing great defense unless they were able to put 2 bigs on the floor. They have to if they want their defense to be great. And that's what they ended up doing, starting Kevon Looney and Slo-Mo at the same time, put Wiggins and Kuminga at the 2 and the 3, and Potts at the point. Now that's a big lineup. It was a great adjustment by the coaching staff that allowed them to hold the Rockets to just 2 points in overtime. That's what can happen for the Warriors when they have proper size, proper length, the know-hows of bigs that are capable of guarding both the paint and the perimeter when necessary. And guess what? The Warriors scored 8 points in overtime to win the game. 8-2. 8-2 in overtime. So they win the game by 6 points. Kuminga scored 6 of those 8 points. So he showed up big time in terms of carrying the team from a scoring standpoint. And the beautiful thing about that is that we could just be happy about Kuminga doing his job from a scoring standpoint, which is his strength, instead of also hoping that he can play the 4, box out everybody, help defend, rebound, all this extra stuff. And at the end of the day, we can praise everybody for playing their roles at the proper positions. The difference between this season and last season is that last season, Steve and Kenny Atkinson, whatever the F, would double down after watching their team suffer because they're too small, and then they end up going into overtime, and then they go even smaller. You see my volume going up in this video, and it's the PTSD left over from last season. This team needs to finally put to bed the notion that they can run a successful closing lineup with either Wiggins or Kuminga at the 4. Enough is enough. That's why you brought in Kyle Anderson to add extra depth. That's why you are starting Trayce Jackson-Davis next to Draymond this season to fundamentally change what you've been over the last couple of seasons to make you more powerful defensively. Defense is what allows you the margin for error and the margin of victory. Once that breaks down, anything goes. You can erase a 30-point deficit like that, just like they did tonight. But at the end of the day, it was such a fantastic win without Steph Curry for the 3rd straight game. This should definitely help you feel legitimized about what the Warriors are this season, for them to miss Steph Curry for 3 games and to win all 3 of them in pretty convincing fashion. Steve just has to find better composure when the team is going through something and the other team has momentum. You gotta put out a lineup that can neutralize whatever the other team is doing with the best defenders possible, which is why they have to, at some point, get to the bottom of this 13-man rotation stuff. Because to begin the 4th quarter, you need better defense. You need to try to cut whatever the Rockets are doing, and Wiggins is still not in the game. Ultimately, Wiggins ends up playing 31 minutes. Listen, when shit hits the fan, the Warriors must be able to go to certain players. And the coaching staff need to know who those players are. You just can't plug this player and that player all over the place. There at some point has to be some level of hierarchy. And you cannot disrespect the starting players the way Steve has been as of late. I don't know why he keeps screwing Trayce out of the equation. This would have been a great matchup for him because you got Tari Eason, you got Amen Thompson. These are athletic 6'8", 6'7" guys that Trayce can meet at the rim, stay in front of them, and he outsizes them and is every bit as athletic as they are. And Trayce can cover the perimeter in case there's a shooter out there like a Jabari Smith or something. Let me say this one more time. Trayce played the first 5 to 6 minutes of the 3rd quarter, and when he left, they had a 28-point lead. Anyway, the Warriors have the entire season to recognize and figure out. If Steve can't figure it out, Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse certainly can. So ultimately, we saw something tonight that we were not able to see for a chunk of last season. And it's because there are better minds sitting next to Steve Kerr, giving him better advice, and he was able to make just enough of the right changes going into overtime to make sure that the Warriors wouldn't suffer what would probably end up being their worst loss of the season, to blow a 31-point lead. That's all I got for now. Ultimately, the Warriors are 5-1 to begin the season. Steph Curry is due back soon. And yes, they have some stuff to figure out, but the glorious season continues. Thanks for watching. Until next time.